want it?
Now!
What do we want? Harm reduction. When do we want it?
Now!
What do we want?
Harm reduction!
When do we want it?
Now!
All right. Thank you guys. Woo!
All right, let's go one more time now.
Okay.
Louder.
We'll do housing, and then the next one, harm reduction.
Okay.
What do we want?
Housing!
And when do we want it?
Now!
What do we want?
Harm reduction!
When do we want it?
Now!
What do we want?
Housing!
When do we want it?
Now!
What do we want?
Harm reduction!
When do we want it?
Now!
All right.
All right. All right, thank y'all for being here today. I'm going to kick us off. My name's Paulette Soltani, and I'm the Director of Organizing at the Texas Harm Reduction Alliance. We're building power with people impacted by the war on drugs, homelessness, and mass incarceration. And we're here with some of our allies who are part of the Community Investment Budget, Austin Justice Coalition. Give it up for the Other Ones Foundation, and Equity Action. And we're all here to say permanent housing and life-saving services cannot be afterthoughts in this year's budget. Today, we want to start the press conference by setting some context. Over 5,000 people are homeless on our streets and in shelters every night with little hope of finding permanent housing in Austin. Meanwhile, 600 households are facing eviction and have no support to eviction prevention services. 417 people died last year of preventable overdose deaths, with a massive increase related to fentanyl overdoses. With so much tragedy happening in Austin, the mayor and city manager seem to think that policing is going to solve these issues. We know it's not. Right, everybody?
Right.
So today we also want to set the record straight about the Mayor Watson's recent announcement that the state awarded $65 million to address homelessness in Austin. About $60 million has been earmarked to support the expansion of non-congregate shelters run by two who's standing here with us today. So we want to say what this is and what this isn't. This investment, this expansion in non-congregate shelter is what a lot of people have been asking for a long time in Austin. These are not city funds, these are federal funds. They are not coming out of the city's budget. But what this isn't, is it isn't a solution to our homelessness crisis. I want to be crystal clear. If the mayor thinks that this is the solution, it is not. And this is not an excuse for the city to forego funding to end homelessness in this year's budget. In the announcement last Friday, the mayor also doubled down on harmful sweeps and said progress on permanent supportive housing has been incremental and slow.
That ain't right.
That ain't right. We know that its progress on these units have actually been delayed because the city refuses to prioritize their completion. We need ongoing funding for services, for vouchers so people can pay the rent, and we need ongoing funding so that these projects can actually close and these units can open up. And so, right now, if the city is investing so much money into temporary shelter, we need to see the same kind of momentum going into permanent supportive housing to address what comes next after shelter. So what are we calling for today? What do we need the City Council to fight for in this year's budget to address the crisis? Number one, no increased funding for APD. Yeah. Right, everybody? The proposed budget adds $32 million to the Austin Police Department, which are completely ineffective at addressing homelessness or drug use, and instead are further harmful, and they marginalize people and cause more violence in our community. We need $1 million for harm reduction services and infrastructure. Give it up, everybody. Yeah. We need $3 million for project-based permanent supportive housing vouchers, $3 million for service funding for permanent supportive housing, $3 million for street outreach services, case managers, and peer support specialists. And lastly, we need $16 million for emergency rental assistance, eviction defense, tenant legal, and supportive services. So with that, I'm gonna bring up some of our amazing speakers to share more about why we're here and why these are such massive needs in our community that our city council needs to fight to address today. First, I'm going to bring up Shaman Perkins, who is a leader in THRA's organizing project. Give it up for Shaman, everybody.
Shaman. Let's go, Shaman.
Hi, my name's Shaman Perskin, and I'm a leader at the Harm Reduction Alliance. And basically, about 8 years ago, I was homeless. I had cancer, and I was able to get a PHS voucher. Well, that voucher saved my life, and basically I went ahead and got this voucher in the midst of having cancer, allowing me to finish my treatment. So basically, fast forward 8 years, I'm still using the same voucher. I'm still allowed to wake up and eat breakfast, you know, whenever I want to, whenever I need to, not as opposed to being on the street and wondering where your next meal is going to come from. So basically, $32 million to the police could be better spent, much better spent. Our harm reduction in the midst of an opiate crisis, and we need more harm reduction for this matter. Nothing else is going to work very well for it. Not policing, not prison, nothing's going to eat our way out of this opiate crisis. To put this into perspective, basically my PHS voucher pays about $1,050 a month. I pay the rest of the rent, the bills, everything, and taxes. Now, how many months is less than half of the proposed $32 million? Just half would be spent on how many months rent. Put that in perspective, it's a win-all situation. These people become tax-paying citizens that become your neighbor instead of the person on the street. You know, so basically what I have to say is we need more harm reduction, and we need it to come out of that $32 million. Thank you.
Sir, can you spell your first and last name for us, please?
SHAMANPERSKIN. Thank you.
All right, next I'm going to bring up 8-Track, a leader in THRA's organizing projects. Give it up for 8-Track.
Hello, and thank you all for coming out on this fine Texas afternoon. My name is 8-Track. I'm a member of the Texas Harm Reduction Alliance leadership team, and I'm also a member of Street Forum. I'm out here in front of City Hall today in solidarity with my friends from THRA and the houseless community in Austin to voice our opposition in the wake Mayor Kirk Watson and the interim city manager Jesus Garza are addressing the gaping wound that is the houselessness crisis in the city of Austin. The city is depending on temporary federal dollars to solve our homelessness crisis with temporary solutions.
That ain't right.
That ain't right.
The contracts for the marshalling yard and the former Salvation Army are finite and in direct opposition to recommendations put forth by the federal government in regards to congregate-style shelters and their ineffectiveness as a legitimate long-term solution to solve homelessness.
That ain't right.
And as of last Friday, we have more money going to temporary shelter, thankfully for non-congregate shelter this time. I became unhoused as a result of an abusive relationship with one of my exes. And sadly, my only option at that time, or so I thought, was to swallow 30-day supply of 3 of my pills and try and kill myself. I ended up working through the system. I was put in a group home, and I was promptly kicked out of the group home because I was still not mentally ready to work, and they kicked me out on the streets. Permanent supportive housing would help me so much because then I can go pick a job that I would actually enjoy, something that wouldn't stress me out, making sure I've got enough hours to make the rent. I could actually live my life and be happy for once, something that hasn't happened to me in a very long time. That's why I'm out here today proposing permanent supportive housing vouchers instead of temporary solutions. On any given night in Austin, there are around 5,000 individuals on the streets with no safe place to sleep, myself included. There's this misconception that the homelessness people in Austin are lazy and they just want to sleep on a sidewalk or in a library all day. Well, believe me, trust me, you're gonna want to sleep in a library too if you spent the previous night wandering around just trying to find a safe place to lay your head, to where you wouldn't be harassed by APD, get what few possessions you had stolen from you while you were asleep. I can't even count how many times that's happened to me now, or even worse. We're not saying that there's no need for these emergency shelters, because there is, especially in this heat. But Mayor Watson and Manager Garza seem only to be interested in spending money on temporary solutions. What happens after someone enters a shelter like the marshalling yard? Where will all the people in these shelters go when the money runs up? How come we're not investing this money into permanent supportive housing? I can't get over the way our city is spending this money. Keep in mind, no city funds seem to be used for any of these projects, except for $3 million that was previously earmarked, for the permanent supportive housing budget.
That ain't right.
Meanwhile, the city plans to add $32 million to APD's annual budget that cannot be reduced later. The solution of cops or temporary shelters is not it. No, we don't need more cops. Yes, we need more emergency shelters, but that alone will not solve the problem. And that's why we are out here today, and we want to thank y'all for coming out here in support as well. Thank y'all.
First and last name spell, please.
8-track, 8-TRAK. Thank y'all.
Love it. Thank you, 8-track.
All right, next I'm going to bring up Barry Jones, another leader in THRA's organizing project. Give it up for Barry.
Come on, Barry.
Hello, my name is Barry Jones. I'm a volunteer leader with Texas Harm Reduction Alliance, and I have been homeless for almost 9 years. Austin is a city that sees itself as the future, a place that people will want to move to. Unfortunately, the proposed budget doesn't further that vision. Austin is currently dealing with the homelessness crisis and an overdose crisis at the same time.
That ain't right.
That's not right. What is called for is life-saving surgery. What is proposed is a political band-aid.
That ain't right.
What Austin needs to meet these two crises are an appropriate number of shelter beds with wraparound services, enough housing case managers to meet the need, and in particular, a commitment to permanent supportive housing. Without PSH, the homeless problem in Austin will never be reduced. The proposed budget allocates a one-time payment of $65 million from COVID relief funds to the problem, primarily for shelter beds. What happens to the people sheltered at the end of this period? Will they be treated like the former residents of the Salvation Army and told they have merely weeks to find someone else to stay? At the same time, Austin Police Department is receiving a permanent increase of $32 million, an amount that under state law can't be reduced once passed.
That ain't right.
That ain't right. The Austin Homeless Strategy Division is an agency dedicated to planning and coordinating the effort against homelessness. Under this budget, the Homeless Strategy Division would see its budget cut. This reflects poorly on Austin's commitment to ending homelessness.
That ain't right.
In short, the priorities revealed in this budget are misguided. It includes no real increases in funding for homelessness, but substantially increases the police budget, revealing an attempt to deal with the problem by policing it to death. And that ain't right.
That ain't right.
No amount of extra policing will reduce the number of homeless. Only permanent housing can do that. The people of Austin demand better for our neighbors. Committing our old, sick, and disabled to a life spent sweltering on the streets of Austin, rather than being treated with compassion and human dignity, does not reflect our values nor the city we are trying to build. Thanks, everybody.
Barry! Yeah, Barry!
Let's scoot in a little bit, y'all. I realize it's pretty hard to hear. All right, next I'm going to bring up João Paulo Connolly from the Austin Justice Coalition. Give it up for him.
All right, JP.
Thank you all. To be clear, the federal resources that are being allocated right now to emergency shelter through the marshalling yard contract or through the dollars that are entering into our system through TDHCA will expire at the end of next year. They will expire at the end of next year. They represent an important contribution, and they represent an important investment in emergency temporary solutions. However, that investment will not be here with us in the short or even in the near-term future. We are going to lose that investment, and when we do lose that investment, all of these Band-Aid solutions that we have committed so many resources to will require of us that we come up with a real answer and a real long-term strategy. We are simply postponing a crisis that will come to the city of Austin. So how do we actually address the crisis instead of simply putting it off? We address the crisis by investing in permanent supportive housing. We address the crisis by investing in services like harm reduction, outreach services, case management, and services on site at every unit of permanent supportive housing that we create. We invest in long-term solutions that stabilize people instead of harassing and re-traumatizing them with sweeps. That is what we need to do as a community, and we need to realign our priorities and think long-term. Yes, short-term emergency strategies and Band-Aids can save lives. They are important, but they are not enough, and we should never settle for that. We must insist that City Council has a duty to Austin's voters to think long-term, to invest in long-term solutions, and through this budget cycle this year, to signal the direction, the course of the ship, that we are thinking in a long-term direction, that we are not simply going to settle for the short-term, immediate Band-Aids that get us through one election cycle and then are gone. And so we have to insist on that. And there's one more thing. An effective homelessness response system that actually successfully transitions folks off the street needs to be a flexible homelessness response system. It needs to be a system that meets every person, every client, every individual where they're at, that comprehends the unique particularities of every individual story, of every kind of trauma, and that can connect people to the resources that they need in order to successfully and stably be housed. In other words, a one-size-fits-all solution will not solve homelessness in Austin. And if all you're investing in is one kind of intervention in one part of the city and in one location, that will not solve homelessness in Austin. So we have to insist that we can do better, and we have to reject one-size-fits-all thinking, and we need to build a system that incorporates harm reduction resources, outreach work, case management, and everything that folks need. We need a system that is well-resourced and that has a long-term plan designed with long-term thinking. Thank you.
All right, last but not least, we're going to bring up Daniela Silva from Equity Action. Give it up for Daniela.
Yeah.
Good afternoon. My name is Daniela Silva. I'm here on behalf of Equity Action and the entire Community Investment Budget Coalition. The Community Investment Budget is an initiative that is co-created by dozens of community organizations, endorsed by hundreds of Austinites. And this was a list of budget recommendations that was sent to council and to the city manager long before the budget was released, the proposal, and it is laying out detailed list of exactly what members of the community need, how much money they need for it, and with certainty all of these projects have people ready to do the work today. Not in 2 years, not in 3 years, but every single item in the community investment budget has people ready to make these projects come to life. Now, one thing that wasn't in the community investment budget at all was policing. And yet, we see a $32 million proposed increase for the police department.
That ain't right.
This proposed increase would bring the entire police budget to just under $500 million
That ain't right.
annually. And I think this is something that not enough Austinites know about, and I don't think that a lot of Austins would be in support of that. This almost $500 million will take up almost 40% of our entire general revenue fund. So 40% of taxpayer dollars will go to policing and policing alone, when we know that public safety and security far reaches past policing. That is just one tiny element when it comes to keeping our communities safe, secure, stable, and thriving. Another item that was not mentioned in the community investment budget was storing away almost $40 million to go into the reserve fund because we apparently don't have a good enough economy today. This is $40 million that could be used to go directly to community investments like harm reduction, like permanent supportive housing, but instead is being stored away or potentially presented to be stored away in the reserves when it could be used for so many of these community projects. What it is that the community is asking for explicitly is investment in early childhood education, investment in the support of local food systems, investment in permanent supportive housing, in harm reduction, in rental assistance for people who just need help for 1 or 2 months to stay in their home. All of these items were explicitly laid out in the community investment budget, and yet this budget, which was no more than 7% of the entire general revenue fund, it was addressed less than 7% of that. So 7% of the 7% of the entire general revenue fund was being addressed by the city manager's proposed budget. That means that 93% of the community needs were being completely ignored, and that is unacceptable. The community is here today to let you know that these needs absolutely must be addressed, and council has to take the initiative to make these changes, to find money for all of the projects that are being proposed today, and take a focus on solutions that will actually keep people in their homes, that will help people get off of the streets, that will help connect people to the resources that they need to have the thriving life to make Austin a place that is an amazing city for all to live, especially those behind me here today. So I just want to thank everyone for coming out, supporting all of our neighbors, housed and unhoused, and we call on the city manager and we call on every single council member to take a look again at the community investment budget and make sure that all of these needs are being addressed in future budget amendments. Thank you.
All right, thank you all for being here. Does the press have any questions before we head inside for the public comment of the budget hearing?
Yeah, can we make this a province of Ukraine? They would rain money down.
We cannot, but thank you for that question.
Right. How many billions would that send?
Any other questions? All right, thank you everybody for being here. We're gonna head inside.
Sorry, I left the mic.
Oh, you're good. Hey, Chuck, you're good, man. It's all good, brother.
Killed it, Ed. Good job.